In today's gripping story, we dive into the chilling mystery of Liam, a young boy whose life is controlled by his own parents. Sarah, the nurse hired to care for him, starts to uncover the shocking truth. Liam isn't just ill. He's being drugged to forget something terrifying he witnessed. As Sarah digs deeper, she's faced with a life-altering choice. Does she risk everything to save him or stay silent and let the nightmare continue? Sarah adjusted her uniform, feeling the familiar weight of her nurse's badge as she stood in front of the grand iron gate. This wasn't her first time working as a nurse, but she had never set foot in a place as imposing as this mansion. The family who had hired her was wealthy, well-known, but also extremely private. Her new patient, Liam, was a 10-year-old boy who had been blind since birth. The air felt unusually heavy, almost eerie, as the gate creaked open. With a suitcase in hand, Sarah made her way down a tree-lined path that led to the massive house. The mansion, surrounded by high stone walls and perfectly trimmed gardens, seemed like it was tucked away from the rest of the world. When she reached the entrance, an elderly woman greeted her with a stiff smile. "Welcome, Miss Sarah. I'm Hebe, the housekeeper. Please, follow me. The family is expecting you," Hebe said, her voice formal but distant. Sarah nodded, brushing aside her initial discomfort. The details were vague, but she knew the family valued privacy and discretion. Her job was straightforward: ensure Liam's treatments were given correctly and make sure he was well cared for. Hebe led Sarah down a long, lavishly decorated hallway before stopping at a large room. Inside, Liam's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, were waiting. Both wore serious expressions. Mrs. Smith, an elegant woman with every hair in place, was the first to speak. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Sarah," Mrs. Smith said. "Our son Liam needs constant attention. His health is delicate, and we trust you'll handle his care with professionalism." Sarah nodded, but there was something in Mrs. Smith's tone that made her uneasy. It felt like they weren't telling her the full story. "I understand," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady. "I've reviewed the medical instructions you provided, and I'm ready to begin." Mr. Smith, a man of few words, simply nodded. "The most important thing is that Liam isn't upset or disturbed," he said firmly. "He's sensitive, and he doesn't take well to new people. We expect patience and discretion." With that, the conversation ended. Sarah had the distinct feeling there was more going on than they were letting on, but it was her first day. She decided not to push it just yet. Hebe escorted her upstairs to Liam's room. When they opened the door, Sarah saw the boy seated in a chair by a large window. His face was calm, almost unnervingly so, and the room felt unusually still. "Hello, Liam," Sarah said gently as she approached him. The boy didn't respond at first. After a few moments, he slowly turned his head in the direction of her voice. "Hi," he whispered. Sarah knelt beside him, studying his delicate features. Though he couldn't see her, it seemed like he was aware of everything around him. She offered him a small, reassuring smile. "I'm Sarah. I'll be taking care of you from now on," she said softly. "We'll be spending a lot of time together, and I'll make sure you're comfortable." Liam sighed weakly, but remained silent. Sarah didn't press him for more. Instead, she turned her attention to Liam's medicine box. A quick glance at the medicines arranged on the bedside table left her feeling confused. There were boxes of the usual treatments related to his blindness, which seemed normal, but a few other methods caught her attention: sedatives and mood-regulating sedatives. She frowned. Why would a child like Liam need such strong medication? Sarah didn't ask any questions right away, but her intuition told her that something was wrong. There was more to Liam's condition than his parents had let on, and Sarah was determined to find out exactly what it was. As she prepared her daily dose, Sarah glanced at the boy sitting quietly in the chair. Liam seemed calm, but there was something about the situation that troubled her. The first day passed without much incident, but that nagging feeling stuck with her. Things just didn't add up. Liam was a peaceful kid, so why did he need such heavy sedation? And why were his parents so closed off when it came to discussing his condition? On her second day, Sarah slipped into her now familiar routine, checking Liam's medications, ensuring everything was in order, and mentally preparing for the tasks ahead. The house still had an odd atmosphere. His parents kept their distance, almost avoiding her altogether, which only fueled Sarah's suspicions. She entered Liam's room with a gentle smile, trying to avoid intruding on his space. As usual, the boy sat by the window, staring into the void with a kind of eerie stillness. He seemed used to being alone, and that made Sarah wonder just how long he had been isolated from others. "Good morning, Liam," she greeted him, trying to sound upbeat. "How are you feeling today?" Liam lifted his head slightly but didn't respond right away. Sarah was used to his quietness. But there was something more to his silence, something that felt more like a learned habit than a personality trait. "I'm fine," he finally said, his voice so faint that it was almost lost in the air. The stillness in the room was overwhelming. Sarah knew her role was to care for his physical well-being, but the longer she spent with Liam, the more she worried about his emotional health. It wasn't just the blindness that set him apart. It was like he had been cut off from any meaningful interaction with the world. As she prepared to administer his medication, Sarah studied the pills more closely. Some were common, blood pressure control, vitamins, but others caught her attention. Sedatives and tranquilizers, the kind you'd typically see prescribed to adults undergoing psychiatric care. Not a child at all. A deep unease settled over her. She decided to tread carefully, trying not to raise alarms but needing answers. "Liam, how do you feel after taking your medicine?" she asked, keeping her tone light. Liam shrugged, seemingly indifferent. "I get tired. Sometimes I fall asleep right after. Mum says that's normal." His response, flat and emotionless, tightened the knot in Sarah's stomach. Why would a child need to be so heavily sedated? Something was off. She knew she needed to investigate more, but without raising the parents' suspicions. Throughout the day, Sarah observed Liam closely. Despite his condition, the boy showed signs of remarkable intelligence. He could tell when people entered the room without needing any cues, and he had an uncanny ability to locate objects with precision. As the hours passed, Liam's curiosity began to reveal itself, though his parents didn't seem to encourage him to explore the world around him. While helping him eat, Liam suddenly spoke, catching Sarah off guard. "Do you think I'll ever be able to see?" His voice was serious, and the question hit Sarah hard, stopping her mid-motion. She wasn't sure how to respond. According to his medical records, Liam had been born blind, and the chances of him gaining sight were virtually non-existent. But the way he asked, the hope in his voice, made her hesitant to crush that tiny spark. "I don't know, Liam," she replied gently, "but I do know that you're very strong, and it's always important to have hope." Liam nodded slowly, as if he accepted the answer, though she could tell he wasn't entirely satisfied. Even though he couldn't see, he seemed to perceive much more than other children his age. It was as if he was trapped inside his mind, isolated not just by blindness, but by something far deeper. Later that afternoon, while Liam slept, Sarah used the quiet time to take a closer look at the medications. Something was definitely wrong here, but she needed to be sure before jumping to any conclusions. Sarah picked up one of the sedative bottles, reading the label carefully. The more she looked into it, the more uneasy she became. This wasn't just any medication. It was prescribed for severe anxiety or to sedate patients with serious psychiatric issues. These weren't the kind of sedatives you'd give a child without a valid reason. Sarah's worry started to grow. Why were they giving Liam these sedatives? With her heart pounding, she checked the other bottles. Most of them were for sedation or emotional control, powerful medications that didn't seem right for a blind child. A knot formed in her stomach. She couldn't just brush this off. Something was clearly wrong, but she wasn't sure how to deal with it. If she confronted the parents too soon, she could lose her job, or even worse, make things harder for Liam. Sarah realized she needed more information before she made any moves. She couldn't sit back and do nothing, but she also couldn't jump to conclusions without solid proof. Liam's well-being was on the line, and Sarah wasn't going to let him suffer in silence. That night, as Liam slept soundly under the influence of the sedatives, Sarah knew this situation was far more serious than she had initially thought. The parents were hiding something, and she had to find out what it was before it was too late. The sedatives were all Sarah could think about. Since she'd found the prescriptions and read up on the powerful sedatives being given to Liam, her anxiety had only deepened. Something was seriously off, and now she felt an urgent need to uncover the truth. The next morning she went about her usual routine, trying not to raise suspicion but with a renewed sense of determination. During breakfast, Liam was quieter than usual. His eyes seemed unfocused, his mind elsewhere, almost like the weight of the medicine kept him in a state of constant lethargy. "How are you feeling today, Liam?" Sarah asked as she set his plate down. He nodded faintly, but didn't lift his head. He seemed so distant, like he was trapped in his own world. Sarah noticed that, despite how bright Liam usually was, the sedatives made him too tired to ask questions or engage like a typical child his age would. Once he was back in his usual spot by the window, Sarah seized the opportunity to slip into the house office, a room she rarely went into. She knew it was strictly off-limits, reserved for Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but she needed answers. Rummaging through papers, she hoped to find anything that would explain why Liam was on such strong medication. After a few tense minutes, she found a file with Liam's name on it. Her pulse quickened as she opened it. Inside were medical reports and documents describing a neurological condition she had never heard about. What she read left her stunned. According to the reports, Liam wasn't just blind. He supposedly had a condition that caused emotional hyperactivity. Doctors had recommended strong sedatives to prevent potentially dangerous outbursts. But something didn't add up. Liam had never displayed any signs of this so-called emotional instability. Sarah had observed him closely. He was a calm, gentle child. Nothing about him justified the extreme sedation he was under. As she read further, she found something even more alarming. Liam had undergone several medical treatments without his consent, under the pretext that he wasn't capable of understanding his condition. His parents had signed off on everything, authorizing procedures that seemed more like attempts to control him than help him. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together in Sarah's mind. Liam was being medicated to keep him sedated, but why? What were they hiding? That afternoon, while Liam was once again asleep under the effects of the sedatives, Sarah knew she needed to dig deeper. She couldn't act recklessly, but she also couldn't let this go on. She called a close friend of hers, a doctor she trusted, and told him everything she had discovered. "Those sedatives are way too strong for a child," her friend said, clearly alarmed. "There's no reason they should be giving him those sedatives unless there's a very specific condition. But from what you've told me, Liam doesn't show any signs of needing them. Something's not right." Her friend's words confirmed what Sarah had feared all along. Something strange was going on, and it was time to get to the bottom of it. Liam didn't need those meds, at least not in the doses they were giving him. They were using them to control him, and it scared her. "What should I do?" Sarah asked, her voice full of worry. "You need more information," her friend advised. But be careful. If the parents are hiding something, they won't want you to find out." That night, Sarah felt stuck. She knew she had to do something, but she also knew she had to be cautious. Liam's well-being was on the line, and every step she took had to be thought through. Sitting in her small room in the mansion, she replayed her friend's words. She couldn't just confront Liam's parents without solid proof. She decided to wait until the morning to dig deeper, then figure out her next move. Something wasn't right. Liam was more drowsy than usual. The meds seemed to be making him groggier by the day. Sarah watched him with concern, wondering how long he could endure being drugged like this. While preparing his medication for the day, she noticed something strange. One of the bottles, meant to be used in small doses, was emptier than it should have been. Someone had been giving him more without telling her. The realization froze her. This was worse than she thought. Not only were they over-medicating Liam, but they were doing it without any reason. Sarah knew at that moment she couldn't stay silent anymore. Liam wasn't just being drugged. He was being controlled, and for reasons she didn't yet understand. Her mind raced, trying to figure out what to do next. She needed to confront the parents, but she had to do it in a way that kept both her and Liam safe. Sarah woke up the next day feeling both anxious and determined. She couldn't stay quiet anymore, but directly confronting Liam's parents could put both of them in danger. She had to be smart about this. After getting Liam ready for the day, Sarah decided to talk to Mrs. Smith privately. Maybe if she approached her carefully, she could get some answers without stirring up too much trouble. She found Mrs. Smith in her office, going through a stack of papers. "Mrs. Smith," Sarah began, trying to keep her voice calm, "I've been going over Liam's medications and wanted to talk to you about them." Mrs. Smith looked up, her face unreadable. She rarely showed any emotion, and Sarah wondered if she had always been this cold, or if life had made her that way. "Is there a problem with the medication?" Mrs. Smith asked, her voice smooth but indifferent. Sarah hesitated for a moment, but she knew she couldn't keep pretending she didn't notice what was going on. "I've noticed some of the sedatives we're giving Liam are pretty strong. I just want to make sure they're being used appropriately, since they don't seem like something a child in his condition would need." Mrs. Smith locked eyes with Sarah, and for a brief second, Sarah thought she saw a flicker of discomfort. But when Mrs. Smith spoke again, she did so with the same calm and cold demeanor. "Liam has a delicate condition, Sarah. The doctors decided these medications are necessary to keep him calm and prevent emotional outbursts. Everything is under control." Sarah's heart raced. She knew Mrs. Smith was hiding something. The sedatives weren't for emotional control, and Sarah was convinced there was more going on than she was being told. "I understand," Sarah said, trying to keep her cool. "I just want to make sure Liam is getting the best care. I'm worried these sedatives might be impacting his development." Mrs. Smith's face tightened slightly, though her tone remained composed. "We appreciate your concern, Sarah, but the doctors caring for him are the best. We trust their judgment, and we don't need you questioning their diagnosis." The tension in the room was thick. Sarah realized this conversation wasn't going anywhere. It was also clear that Liam's parents didn't want her getting too involved. They were hiding something, and Sarah was determined to uncover it. After that conversation, Sarah started paying closer attention to the happenings in the house. She noticed Hebe, the maid who held the keys to the mansion, always avoided discussing Liam. The parents barely interacted with the boy. There were secrets everywhere. That afternoon, while Liam slept deeply under the influence of the sedatives, Sarah took a chance and explored the mansion. She had noticed certain locked rooms, places she wasn't allowed to enter. She had overheard whispered conversations between the staff, as though they had all agreed to keep certain things hidden. Determined not to stay in the dark, Sarah approached Hebe, hoping she could get some clue. "Hebe," Sarah said casually as they crossed paths in the hall, "I've been a little concerned about Liam. Do you know anything more about his condition?" Hebe immediately stiffened, her posture rigid. "I don't know anything, miss," she replied quickly. "The family handles everything with the child. We just do our jobs." Sarah could hear the nervousness in Hebe's voice. She clearly didn't want to talk about Liam, which only heightened Sarah's suspicions. Something was going on, something the family didn't want her, or anyone, finding out. That evening, Sarah made up her mind to dig deeper. She had noticed that on certain nights Liam's parents would go out for dinner, leaving her alone in the mansion with him. This was her chance. She decided to investigate the locked rooms, hoping to find clues that would explain why Liam was on such heavy medication. The door at the end of the hall was always locked, but Sarah had seen Hebe, the housekeeper, open it a few times. With some luck, she found the key in the cleaning closet and managed to unlock the door. What she discovered inside left her frozen. It was a small office, filled with medical records, not just for Liam, but for other children as well. Some of the files looked like they belonged to previous patients, and all of them showed treatment plans with the same sedatives being given to Liam. Sarah's hands shook as she flipped through the documents. Her heart pounded in her chest. Were there other children who had been through the same thing as Liam? What was this family really doing? She noticed that some of the children's files just stopped, as if they had disappeared after a certain point in their treatment. There was no further information on what happened to them. Sarah felt panic rising in her chest. She couldn't stay quiet any longer. Liam was in real danger, and she had to act fast. That night, as Liam slept under the influence of yet another dose of sedatives, Sarah sat in her small room, going over everything she had uncovered. The documents, the records of the other children, the unnecessary medications. Everything pointed to something sinister happening in that house. Liam's parents were hiding something, and Liam himself was caught in the middle. Sarah knew she couldn't just grab Liam and run. His parents were too powerful, and if they sensed any threat, they might do something to hurt him before she could intervene. She needed a plan. She needed proof. Desperate, she called her friend again for advice. "You've got to get him out of there," her friend urged, her voice thick with urgency. "Those sedatives are doing serious harm. If they keep pumping him full of that stuff, it could cause permanent damage to his nervous system. There's no reason for them to keep him in this state." Sarah's heart sank. She knew her friend was right, but the thought of confronting Liam's parents terrified her. She needed answers. She needed to understand why they were doing this before she could make a move. She made a risky decision to gradually reduce Liam's medication. A few weeks later, while Liam's parents were away for a meeting, Sarah decided to talk to Liam. Although he had to take sedatives for a long time, she hoped he might still remember something or offer some insight into his situation. Sitting beside his bed, she asked softly, "Liam, how do you feel after you take your medicine?" "Tired," he mumbled. "I'm always tired." His voice was weak but unmistakably clear. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. His parents were keeping him in this state for a reason, but why? Instinct told her the answer lay in something Liam had known in the past. "Has anyone told you why you need to take those pills?" she asked, hoping for any kind of hint. It took a long moment for Liam to respond. He seemed to be struggling against the haze of the sedatives in his system. Finally, he muttered, They said it's because of something I saw. Sarah's heart raced. Something he knew? That had to be it. His parents were drugging him to keep him from remembering or talking about whatever it was that he had witnessed. This was the key. Sarah now knew she had to act fast. Liam's life might depend on it. That evening, as Sarah prepared dinner, her mind raced with thoughts of what Liam had revealed earlier. She couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened. She knew Liam's parents were hiding something, and now it was clear that their intention was not to help their son, but to keep him quiet. "What do you know, Liam?" Sarah asked, her voice calm but urgent. Liam hesitated, his small eyebrows furrowed as if struggling to recall a vague memory. "I heard Mom and Dad with another man, someone I didn't know. They argued for a long time, and then I heard screaming." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. "Then my mother told my father something about the murder, the police, and not letting anyone know, or she would go to jail." Those weren't any memories that Liam found by chance. That was something his parents absolutely did not want him to remember. Whatever had happened, it was a nightmare for Liam. And now they were keeping him sedated, not because he was sick, but because they didn't want him talking. Sarah's stomach churned as she stirred the pot of soup on the stove. She couldn't wait any longer. Liam was in danger. She had to get him out before the sedatives did irreversible damage to his mind. But confronting the Smiths was risky. She wasn't sure how she could pull it off without them catching on to her plan. That night, after the Smiths returned from their evening out, Sarah made her move. She waited for them in the living room, nerves buzzing beneath her calm exterior. The air was thick with tension as they entered, sensing something was off. "I need to talk to you both," Sarah said, her voice steady, despite the storm brewing inside her. Mr. and Mrs. Smith exchanged glances, suspicion flickering in their eyes, but they nodded, allowing her to speak. "I've been caring for Liam these past few weeks," she began, carefully choosing her words. "And I've noticed that the medication we're giving him isn't helping. It's hurting him. These sedatives, they're dangerous. I can't keep allowing this." Mrs. Smith's face tightened, while Mr. Smith remained still, his gaze fixed on Sarah. "I don't think you're in a position to question our decisions about Liam's health," Mrs. Smith said coolly. "We trust the doctors. It's not just about the medication," Sarah pressed, her heart pounding. "Liam told me he saw something you don't want him to remember, and I'm starting to understand why you're keeping him drugged all the time." The room fell into an icy silence. Mr. Smith crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Smith lowered her eyes as if she'd been caught. "You're keeping him sedated so he won't talk," Sarah continued, her voice stronger now. "He's not sick. He's being silenced." Mrs. Smith finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper, laced with guilt. "It's for his own protection. Liam saw something he shouldn't have. Something that could destroy our family. We're doing what we think is necessary." Sarah's heart sank. She hadn't expected them to admit it so easily, but now that they had, everything clicked. They were sacrificing their son's well-being to cover up a dark family secret. "I can't stand by and let this happen," Sarah said firmly. "I'm going to get Liam out of here." Mr. Smith stepped forward, his face hardening. "I think carefully before doing something you'll regret. You don't know what you're getting yourself into." Sarah felt the weight of his threat, but she couldn't back down now. Liam needed her. She had to get him out. That night, Sarah lay awake in bed, replaying Mr. Smith's words in her mind. "You don't know what you're getting into." She knew she was up against something far more dangerous than she had imagined, but she also knew that she couldn't leave Liam in that house. He was in danger, and she was the only one who could save him. By dawn, Sarah had made up her mind. She had to act. Mr. and Mrs. Smith had a morning business meeting, her one chance to get Liam out without them noticing. As the sun rose, casting a pale light over the house, Sarah moved quickly, then tiptoed to his room. He was still groggy from the medication, but Sarah gently shook him awake. "Liam, it's time to go," she whispered, her voice filled with urgency. "We're leaving." Liam blinked, confused but trusting her. Sarah scooped him up, his head resting on her shoulder as she carried him out of the house. She knew the risks, but she couldn't let fear stop her now. They slipped out the back door, the cold morning air hitting their faces as they made their escape. Sarah knew this was only the beginning, but for now, they were free, and she would do whatever it took to keep Liam safe. While the Smiths were away, the plan to get Liam to safety was set into motion. Before Mr. Smith left, Sarah kept her cool, pretending everything was normal. She made breakfast, looked after Liam, and stuck to their usual routine to avoid suspicion. She knew that showing even a hint of nervousness might tip them off that something was brewing. The tension in the house was thick, but Sarah stayed calm and focused on the plan. As soon as Liam's parents left, Sarah moved quickly, packing the essentials. She knew time was not on her side. Liam, although still groggy from the sedatives, was awake. Thankfully, Sarah had been secretly lowering his doses, giving him a bit more energy and clarity. "Liam, we're leaving," she whispered, her voice soft but determined. "I'm taking you somewhere safe." Liam looked at her, dazed and confused, but his trust in her was clear. He didn't fully understand what was going on, but something in Sarah's voice told him she was trying to help. "Why are we leaving?" Liam asked as Sarah helped him to his feet. "They're hurting you with those meds," Sarah said firmly. "I'm taking you somewhere where you won't need them anymore." Liam didn't ask anything else. He'd learned to trust Sarah. She was the only one who'd shown him kindness since they met. They moved swiftly through the house, avoiding the few staff still lingering. Sarah knew Hebe, the housekeeper, wouldn't raise too many questions if she saw them leaving, but she didn't want to take any chances. The plan was simple: get to the car and drive straight to the hospital, where a doctor Sarah knew would help. But just as they were about to slip out the back door, the sound of a car pulling up stopped her in her tracks. The Smiths were back, much earlier than expected. Panic surged through her. There was no time to run, no place to hide. She had to act fast. "Liam, listen to me," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need you to stay quiet. Stay right here and don't move. I'll take care of this." Liam's face showed fear, but he nodded. Sarah quickly hid him behind a large column in the garden and walked to the front to meet the Smiths head-on. When Liam's parents got out of the car, they saw her standing by the door, blocking their path. The confrontation she had dreaded was finally here. "Where do you think you're going, Sarah?" Mr. Smith asked, his voice icy and calculating. "I'm getting Liam out of here," Sarah shot back, her voice steady. "I'm not going to let you keep hurting him." Mrs. Smith tried to keep her cool, but Sarah could hear the strain in her voice. "You're making a mistake. You don't understand what's at stake here. Liam can't talk about what he saw. If he does, it'll be over for all of us, including him. We've only done what's necessary to protect him." "Protect him?" Sarah couldn't hold back her anger. "You're destroying him with those sedatives. You're keeping him sedated so he can't remember anything. That's not protection." Mr. Smith stepped toward her, his voice lowering into a dangerous tone. "If you take Liam, you won't be able to hide. We have power, connections. you won't get far." Sarah knew there was truth in his words. It wouldn't be easy, but she couldn't let fear control her. "What you're doing to Liam is a crime," she said, locking eyes with Mr. Smith, "and I'm not going to stand by and let it happen." At that moment, Hebe, the housekeeper, appeared from the hallway, witnessing the tense standoff. Sarah could see a flash of hesitation on Hebe's face. It was clear that Hebe knew Sarah was doing the right thing, but was terrified of what might happen next. Then, out of nowhere, Hebe made a move that Sarah never expected. She walked over to the Smiths and, without a word, positioned herself next to Sarah. "It's time this stops," Hebe said, her voice steady. "Liam doesn't deserve any of this." Mrs. Smith started to object, but Hebe cut her off sharply. "I've been with this family for years, and I can't keep watching you destroy your own son. Sarah's right. This needs to end now." That moment shifted everything. With Clara on her side, Sarah was able to get Liam into the car. The Smiths, caught in their own web of deceit, could do nothing but stand by as Sarah drove off, the car fading into the distance. Sarah headed straight to the hospital where her friend, a doctor, was already waiting. Liam was admitted for immediate care. In the weeks that followed, the heavy sedatives in his system started to wear off, and little by little, Liam's memories began to return. Liam sat quietly on his bed, staring off into the distance. Then, breaking the silence, he said, "That man who was with my parents the night everything happened. His name was Dr. David Cooper." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She remembered the stack of children's medical records she'd stumbled upon in Mr. Smith's office. Trying to piece it together, she asked cautiously, "Liam, do you have any brothers or sisters?" Liam shook his head. "No, I'm an only child, but when I was younger, other kids would sometimes come to the house. They'd stay for a bit, then they'd just disappear. One day they were here, and the next they were gone." His words hit Sarah hard, and she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that grew in the pit of her stomach. Who were those kids, and what did Dr. Cooper have to do with all of this? Something wasn't adding up. That night, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about what Liam had said, so she sat down with her laptop and started digging online. Hours passed, and just when she thought she wouldn't find anything, an old news article caught her eye. She clicked on it, and her heart skipped a beat. The headline read, "Dr. David Cooper vanishes after allegations of involvement in child trafficking ring." Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the screen. The room felt colder, the walls closing in. "This can't be real," she whispered to herself, but the words in front of her told a different story. She knew she had to act, and fast. Grabbing her phone, she hesitated for a moment, then dialed the police. "If I don't speak up now," she thought, "something worse could happen. It might already be too late." As the phone rang, Sarah braced herself. She wasn't just fighting for Liam anymore. She was fighting for children. In the following days, Sarah worked closely with the authorities, giving them all the information she had. She even managed to convince Liam to talk to the police about what he remembered. At first, he was hesitant. His parents had controlled his life for so long that it felt impossible to turn against them. But deep down, Liam knew it was the right thing to do. "I need to tell them everything," Liam said one day, determination in his voice, "for my own sake, and for the sake of the kids who never came back." Liam testified against his parents. It wasn't easy. But once he spoke up, the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. Despite their attempts to dodge responsibility, the truth about Mr. and Mrs. Smith's crimes came to light. They were convicted of murder and child kidnapping. For the first time in his life, Liam was no longer under their control. The chains of manipulation and deceit were finally broken. As weeks passed, Liam began to heal, not just physically, but mentally too. It was a long road ahead, but the darkness that had once consumed him was starting to lift. Sarah knew that while the journey wouldn't be easy, she had done the right thing. She had saved Liam from a life of lies, secrets, and fear. Now, Liam had a real shot at living his own life, free from the shadows that had haunted him for so long. He was no longer just free from sedatives. He was free to be himself. Sarah and Liam's story truly shows us the power of courage and determination. In a world full of secrets and lies, sometimes all it takes is one person to stand up and say, "Enough," to change someone's life forever. Laura did that for Samuel, and because of her, he now has the chance to live a free and happier life. If this story touched you, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss more inspiring stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.